Hi there, this is Tony from pianotone.ca, and in this video I'm going to be comparing two entry-level 88 key fully weighted hammer action pianos, the Alesis Recital Pro and the iNovus i88. I do have full in-depth reviews on both of these pianos that I will link to below. So in this video I'm going to be focusing more on a head-to-head comparison between the two, looking at their action, their sounds, their features, and their connectivity. And both of these are really great value options, and they each have some interesting features, so let's check it out. So the first piano I ever owned was actually an Alesis Recital Pro. I had it for about a year when I first started playing piano. I then upgraded to a Roland FP30, which is about twice the price. And then I actually traded that in on a Yamaha P125, which is what I have currently. When I did my review on the Alesis about a year ago, the folks at iNovus noticed the review and they contacted me to do a review on their new product, the i88. They were good enough to lend me one. Ever since then, there's been quite a bit of interest in getting a head-to-head done between these two pianos. So a friend of mine was good enough to lend me their Alesis Recital Pro for the review, and iNovus was good enough to send me another one of their pianos for the head-to-head. So thanks to everyone for helping make this review possible. Okay, so action. Both of these pianos have 88 fully weighted hammer action keys, but neither piano's action is graded. So they're the same weight across the entire keyboard, as opposed to a graded hammer action piano, which, like an acoustic piano, is going to feel a little bit heavier in the lower end and a little bit lighter to play up in the higher end. That being said, as far as developing your finger strength and getting you accustomed to what an acoustic piano might feel like, having a fully weighted action really is most of the battle. Now, while both of these are fully weighted, they do feel quite different from each other. Now, the Alesis Recital Pro action, to me, is noticeably heavier than the iNovus action, and that's neither a good or a bad thing. It's purely a personal preference. Action is a very personal thing. Not all acoustic pianos are going to feel the same either. I also found when going back and forth between the two that the action on the Alesis felt a little bit shallower and also a tiny bit kind of mushy and perhaps a bit less of a consistent dynamic response. So it seemed like there were some keys, in particular the black keys, that would sometimes sound a little bit louder given the same amount of dynamic pressure, like the intensity with how hard you're playing them. So that could be from the weighting just being slightly different on the black keys than on the white keys. But I didn't experience any of those kinds of issues with the iNovus, and I actually found the action on the iNovus really satisfying to play. I also noticed the Alesis keys have a fair bit of side-to-side movement that the iNovus keys do not, and that's something where, for example, if you're doing a glissando, not that that's usually a thing that I do that often, but you're actually going to hear the keys on the Alesis hit each other as I do that. Whereas if I do that on the iNovus, you're just hearing them bounce up and down, but you're not hearing them hit each other. Now, in all fairness, I should also mention that the lighter action on the iNovus is going to be a bit more familiar to me because the action on my piano, which is a Yamaha P125, is also kind of a lighter action as well, so that familiarity might be coloring my opinion a little bit. And when I owned my Alesis Recital Pro for the first year when I started playing piano, I always really did enjoy the action on it quite a bit. I should also mention that the Alesis and the iNovus do both allow you to adjust the touch sensitivity more to your liking. So you do have some control over how the pianos react to the dynamics of your playing. So I have both of these on their default touch sensitivity settings, and I'll just quickly try and demonstrate the dynamics as best as my beginner skills can do. Okay, so before I get into the sounds, I should mention how I'm recording the sounds on this video. The Alesis Recital Pro has left and right line outputs, so those are going into a mixer of mine. And the iNovus has a single stereo output on the back, so that is being split into a left and right signal. That is also going into my mixer, and then my mixer is then sending its signal to my audio interface, which is what you're going to be hearing. And I have not added any effects or any cueing or any adjustments to the sounds on the mixer. So for sounds, the Alesis Recital Pro has 12 sounds, and the iNovus i88 has a whopping 200 sounds. But included in that 200, however, are kind of some obscure instrument sounds as well as some sound effects. So at least for me, it might be fun to have and use some of these on rare occasions, like pulling out a trumpet for Penny Lane or some of the guitar sounds for a particular song or something. But for the most part, I would probably use about 30 or so of the sounds on the iNovus on a regular basis. It would be the pianos, the organs, the keyboard instrument sounds, electric pianos, etc. So let's check out a few of these sounds, in particular the main piano, the electric piano, strings, and organs on each instrument. Now, neither of these instruments has super high quality samples that change or adjust drastically with your playing, like you might see in some much more expensive pianos like Yamahas and Rolands, etc. But I find that the bread and butter sounds on both of these are just fine and perfectly usable and pretty good for the price point, actually. And also keep in mind that sounds are a very personal thing. So let's check them out. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the default piano sound on each instrument with the instrument's default reverb activated. So let's check that out. So those are the default piano sounds on the two instruments. They are both perfectly decent, very different from each other though, and it is totally a personal preference as to which one you like. I find the Alesis one to be a little bit more maybe on the low end, and maybe a tiny bit muffled, but bassier. And I find the iNovus voice to be extremely bright, very, very clear. And once again, totally a personal preference. So let's move on to the default electric piano. Now let's check out the default harpsichord. Okay, so once you start getting into your organs, your strings, and your synth sounds, that's where the iNovus really starts to offer a pretty big advantage in terms of variety. The Alesis has a kind of a jazzy organ, it has a church organ, it has a synth sound, and it has one string sound that's kind of a slow attack and decay. On the iNovus for organs, it's got a few different organ options. There's a Hammond organ, a percussion organ, a rock organ, and a reed organ, as well as a church organ. Quite a few more options for you there. And then for strings, it's got two. One that has a fast attack and decay, and then one like the Alesis with a slow attack and decay. Then there's also some strings and synth combos that are really interesting on the iNovus, as well as all sorts of pad sounds as well that can also be used like you would use strings to kind of layer with piano. So quite a few more options there. So I'll quickly try to demonstrate some of those for you. So you can see there are quite a few more voice options on the iNovus, so that does definitely give it a bit of an advantage over the Alesis. And also some of the other ones, even some of the more obscure ones, it's interesting if you're into this kind of thing to try different combinations out. For example, I play Your Song by Elton John a fair bit. And I thought instead of just using the traditional strings or pad or something in the background, I'll try to find other voices to combine the piano with. So I tried combining it with the harp because there was actually some harp in that song. It sounds kind of cool, so I just wanted to quickly show that. So this is the piano by itself. Now when I layer in the harp, this is what I get. So you can get some really cool sounds by experimenting with these 200 different tones. Okay, so features and connectivity. There's a number of common features on these two pianos, and there's some notable differences. Common features, they both have 128 notes of polyphony, and they both have, quite frankly, really good onboard user interfaces. They both have screens, lots of buttons. It's easy to navigate settings and voices and to make choices, that type of thing. A lot of pianos that can be twice the price of either one of these will not have a screen, have very few buttons, and might even be getting you to, for something as simple as changing a voice, look up in your manual what key you have to press while you hold down a function button. So fantastic user interfaces on both of these keyboards. Now both of these pianos have different types of reverb and chorus effects that you can choose to turn on or off and adjust the levels of to kind of customize your voices. They also both have layering, which allows you to layer two voices together, and also a super important extra feature that they both have is the ability to adjust the relative volume between those two voices. So each of these pianos have a very simple single track, one song recorder on board. It's not meant to be something that you can then export to an audio workstation or something. It's just something to quickly capture a piece that you're playing and listen to it, which is pretty handy to have. They both have a lesson mode, which splits the keyboard into two halves of the same octave, intent being that you're going to be sitting beside someone else, like an instructor, and then you'll both be playing in the same octave. They both have headphone jacks, of course. The Alesis has one. It is in the back. The iNovus has two that are in the front, and then it also has the audio output jack that is currently going to my mixer in the back. They both have a metronome that you can configure for tempo and time signatures. They both allow you to transpose the keyboard into different keys, which is pretty handy for us beginners. And they can both be used as MIDI controllers from their USB to device ports with the proper cables. So you can use them with MIDI compatible software or apps like GarageBand or digital audio workstations. So now to where these two pianos start to differ from each other in features and connectivity. So now on to some of the features that are unique to the iNovus. One of the big ones is it's got basic arranger keyboard functionality built in. It's got 100 rhythms with optional auto accompaniment. There's variations, and you can set it to sync start. There's fills. You can set endings to be triggered, that type of thing. You can also adjust the relative volume of whatever voice you have chosen with the rhythm backing. Now this, in my opinion, is a huge feature that I would use constantly, especially the drum beats. I play almost all modern music as opposed to classical, so whenever I'm playing, I'm pretty much almost always playing along with a drum beat of some sort. Even when I practice scales, I just find it a lot more engaging than a metronome. And if you choose to use iNovus's Smart Play auto accompaniment feature, then the chords that you trigger with your left hand will tell the auto accompaniment instruments how to follow you along. So let's check that out. So one thing I should mention, the way iNovus implemented the rhythms is extremely well done, because they've got actual dedicated buttons for all of the different things that you're going to need to do if you're going to use the rhythms. There's a dedicated button for turning the auto accompaniment on and off, for triggering an intro, for which variation do you want to use, do you want to trigger a fill, all of that kind of stuff. And it's really easy to access that while you're playing. So I'm going to turn on the intro to signify I want an intro when I start. I'm going to turn on the auto accompaniment. instead of just starting it, I'm going to hold that down, and then now it's going to sync start when I start to play. So now the intro is over and it's into the main part. Then I can trigger a fill and switch to the next variation. Now you'll notice I was playing single finger chords, and that's giving me a major chord. So that's a great way for a beginner to get started with playing along with lead sheets, where they can just finger a very simple major chord, play the melody or whatever they want to do up here in the right hand. And then as they get more advanced, then they can start to use full fingered chords in the left hand, and that's going to allow you to switch to things like a minor chord. And then the auto accompaniment is going to follow you along. So one more quick comment on the rhythms. Given my personal interest in always using rhythms quite extensively when I'm playing, the way that iNovus has implemented that with all of the easy to access buttons is one of the best implementations on a digital piano that I've seen of rhythms. Built-in rhythms on digital pianos are very often kind of a difficult to control afterthought, where they're there, but they're not the easiest to use. So that's extremely well done. So the i88 also has 4 registration banks where you can save your current choices for voices and rhythms, what the tempo is, do you have the voices layered, which voice have you chosen, all of that kind of stuff. So you can quickly recall them. And that is pretty handy for, especially for a keyboard that has that many voices and rhythms available to you. The Alesis doesn't have any registration banks, but that being said, it doesn't really need any because it doesn't have any rhythms, and all of the voices on the Alesis, there's only 12, they each have their own dedicated button, so it doesn't really need one. So the next big feature that iNovus has is 3 different types of audio in options. Those are going to allow you to listen to other music or sound sources from a device through your speakers or your headphones. Super, super handy feature, especially for beginners. It's going to allow you to play along with a YouTube video, or to listen to an online piano lesson, or play along with your music library on your device. Super, super handy. Now, the 3 options for this are, there's a 1/4 inch audio input port on the back that you could connect your device to with a cable and the proper adapter if needed from your device's headphone port. There's also a Bluetooth audio in, so you could pair your device with the iNovus and then play along with any audio stream that you want that's on your device. There's also on the front, there's a USB flash drive port where you could plug in a flash drive with MP3s on it and play along with those. And an extra little added bonus is that if you are using a compatible app on whatever your source is, most likely like a music player app or something as opposed to YouTube or a website, there's actually controls on the iNovus keyboard to go to the next song, play, pause, that type of thing. So as long as the app is compatible, that's going to work as well, which is super, super handy. Okay, so another feature that the iNovus offers is that it comes with actually a pretty decent quality sustain pedal. Most digital pianos will come with a cheap little plastic switch like this. This actually came with my Yamaha P125, which is twice the price of the iNovus or the Alesis. And these pedals, they're functional, but they're really not the greatest. So the fact that iNovus includes a decent quality pedal is awesome. The Alesis actually does not include a pedal, so if you decide to get an Alesis, you're going to have to buy a pedal online as well. Now, when I did my first review on the iNovus i88, I did notice that it has a kind of a proprietary DIN port instead of the standard 1/4 inch port. And I was kind of wondering, why did they do that? They should have had a standard 1/4 inch port so that if this pedal breaks or something, you can just buy a new generic one online. Turns out, however, that port will accommodate a triple pedal unit that iNovus is working on. So if you're taking traditional piano lessons and you want to be able to learn how to use the other 2 pedals that are on an acoustic piano, that's a pretty huge feature that iNovus is going to be offering up. One maybe recommendation I would make to iNovus is instead of switching that port, now that I know that, to a 1/4 inch, maybe they could add a 1/4 inch port so that if all you're going to use is the plain sustain pedal, then you would have the ability to use a generic one of your own. Okay, now the last thing that iNovus has that Alesis does not is traditional MIDI DIN connectors. Most beginners are probably going to ignore these ports. Some advanced users who use things like MIDI sequencers will appreciate these ports being available, but it's not something I'm ever going to use. But there are people out there that would be very happy to see the ports on the piano. Okay, so now on to some things that the Alesis has that the iNovus doesn't. One of the big ones for me is that the Alesis allows you to split the keyboard into the two different voices on the left and the right. So I like to have bass in the left and then piano or organ in the right to play kind of bluesy, jazzy stuff. So let's check that out. Now the iNovus does allow you to split the keyboard into two halves, and you can have two different voices on each half, except they're going to be in the same octave. So that's kind of more like the lesson mode on the Alesis, which also has that. So you could technically do that, put the bass on the left and the piano on the right, but they're going to be in the same octave, so it's not going to be quite as usable. Now the other features that the Alesis offers are both features that might make it a bit more usable for a performance situation. The first of those is the Alesis has proper left and right line outputs for connecting to external amps like PAs, amplifiers, that type of thing. And the iNovus has an output. It's a single jack stereo output that you need to use a splitter cable to connect to external audio equipment, which is how I'm recording it in this video. So it does work. It's just not quite as ideal as the dedicated left and right line outputs are. The other feature is the Alesis can actually run on batteries. So for things like busking or a situation where you don't have any power, you could still actually use the Alesis for that. Okay, I also wanted to do just a really quick speaker comparison. So I'm not going to be recording these with a fancy mic. It's just going to be what my lapel mic is picking up. So you're going to be hearing what I'm hearing from sitting in front of these two pianos. So let's check that out. So what's my final opinion? Which piano wins? Well, to be honest, they're both really good value. For around $400 US, you're getting 88 key, fully weighted hammer action pianos that have decent voices, decent sized speakers, and some great features, including both being inexpensive options for fully weighted MIDI controllers. They both, at least at the time I recorded this video, also included free trial memberships to piano learning apps that you can download. Alesis includes a subscription to Scoove, and iNovus includes a subscription to the Piano Academy. Now the Alesis has a heavier action, if that's what you're after. It also has a super simple user interface. I mean, you can just turn it on, press a button, and start playing. And it also has the ability to split the keyboard into left and right if that's something that's important to you. And it has the left and right line outputs for connecting to external audio equipment. And it can also run on batteries, so it might have a bit of an edge over the iNovus in terms of performance use, in particular battery operation. Now the iNovus has a lighter action, once again, if that's what you're after. And it has a lot more voices and a bunch of super useful features like the rhythms and auto accompaniment, various options for audio in, so you can listen to and play along with other audio sources, and a really good quality included the sustain pedal with the possibility of adding a triple pedal down the line. So if I was making the decision between these two pianos for myself, I would personally choose the iNovus because I prefer the lighter action, and the rhythms and audio in features would be super valuable to me. I would use them all the time. And I like both piano voices, but I definitely prefer the quality and the quantity of the electric piano and organ voices that are available on the iNovus, and also having access to some of the other more obscure voices just for occasional use is definitely an advantage. That being said, I also owned an Alesis Recital Pro for a year when I first started playing piano, and I really liked it. So if you want more in-depth info on these two pianos, I do have links to the YouTube videos as well as the written versions that I did reviewing each one of these in depth. And I'm also going to be including, once I've got them done, links to a couple of all-play, no-talk videos where I play along to some backing tracks with each of these. So you can listen to those as well if you want to hear more. And if you want to check out current pricing on either of these pianos, I've included my affiliate links below. So thanks a bunch for watching this video, and happy piano shopping and happy piano playing.